This video is brought to you by Raycon and their high-quality, affordable range of wireless earbuds. Whether it's for fitness, gaming, or everyday use, Raycon earbuds deliver, and they do so at a very reasonable price. Click the link to check them out for yourself, or stick around to the end of the video to learn more. The love and care that's gone into Robocop Rogue City is its most endearing quality. You can tell that these people loved Robocop, and they were going to do every single thing that they could to make the best Robocop game ever. Not a high bar to clear, of course, but that's besides the point. These people pulled out all the stops. You've got the shooting range. You've got the car park with the ramp. You've got that staircase where the OCP guy yells at Lewis for talking to Robocop in that hallway. You've got the OCP boardroom where ED-209 makes his first boo-boo. You've got the arcade from Robocop 2 where Murphy's like,
"Isn't this a school day?"
Remember that commercial from Robocop 2 with the sunblock? There is an entire side quest based on that sunblock. I'm not even joking. It's got ED-209 units and they look fucking sick. It's got the Kane robot from Robocop 2, and it's even got these guys. Remember these guys? It's even got all the sick one-liners, like when shit's about to go down and Murphy's all like,
"You better go, Miss Ortiz. It seems there will be trouble."
There's a piece of graffiti in one level that's just like, "Can you fly, Bobby?" And I'm sitting on my couch doing these ones. The best one is when you're chatting with this OCP dude and he's all like,
"Just don't be late. Now, you leave. Bitches, come!"
When he said that, I like clapped. I'm like, yes, well played writing team. I would buy that for $1. Finally, and most importantly, it wouldn't be a Robocop game if you couldn't shoot people in the dick. So thankfully, you can shoot people in the dick.
They stand no chance against you.
I will say though that in Rogue City, a shot to the nuts can have some very unexpected side effects. So, as a fan of Robocop, this stuff is like a communion with the developers, because you're like, yes, I see that you see what this is and you respect it. There was no effort made to fuck with its DNA. This is not some cynical skewering of the source material that downplays it or makes fun of it or reinterprets aspects of it for more modern contexts. Robocop didn't need any of that because it was already perfect and timeless, and Teon knew that, and it's basically the best part of this entire game. However, just because Teon are wise enough to revere the sacred text that is Robocop does not mean they are always successful in their recreation of it. It's easy to put the shooting range in the police station. It's much harder to capture the spirit of the original characters or to recreate the biting satire and political commentary that made Robocop a fucking masterpiece. On the character front, not gonna lie, it's pretty brutal. The biggest casualty is Lewis. Oh man, look what they did to my girl. So, to be clear, in the movies, Lewis is a fucking badass. Her intro scene was literally just her kicking the shit out of someone in the precinct. She is meant to be strong and fierce and take no shit. True story, the filmmakers didn't want to present her as a doe-eyed damsel in distress or a potential love interest for Murphy, so they gave her that short haircut to make her look more masculine and less attractive. Spoiler alert, it didn't work. In Robocop Rogue City, Lewis is... man, I don't even really know how to describe it.
I'm not letting you off that easily.
You sound just like my wife.
If that's the case, let's get you patched up. We wouldn't want to get on her bad side.
There are other scenes like this throughout the game where she has this really kind of nurturing quality, which is just not really what Lewis is about. It's hard to really show the full extent of it here using just a few clips, but at no point in this entire game does Lewis sound or feel like actual Lewis. It's definitely a problem because you have so much that is being faithfully recreated when one of the central pillars of Robocop is just this vapid facsimile.
Anyway, I think I need a little rest after all this excitement. Thank you for visiting me. We'll be back to working together in no time.
I look forward to it.
It's a more complicated story when it comes to Robocop himself. Now, they did manage to get the legendary Peter Weller, the original actor for both Robocop 1 and 2, to voice Alex Murphy here in Robocop Rogue City. That is a big deal, and again, it speaks to the love that these developers clearly have for the source material. Sadly though, through a combination of bad writing and bad direction, it just doesn't work here.
There is no crying on the Force.
Now, Weller is older at this point. He's 76 years old, and I've seen some commentary like, oh, he's old, so, his delivery here, it makes sense because he ain't got it anymore, right? This is an interview with Peter Weller from earlier this year, just a few months ago, in fact, where he was just hanging out at a fan convention. Take a listen.
One of the most talented people and one of the funniest people and one of the most gifted people is a guy right here at this expo, Christopher Lloyd. I could talk forever about Christopher Lloyd.
Doc Brown himself.
Now, does that sound like a frail old man who can't deliver a line anymore? No, this dude has still got it, so the weird, vacant delivery that you hear in Robocop Rogue City cannot be explained by a decline in this man's faculties. It was clearly a conscious choice on the part of the game makers to have him sound this way.
Spike and what is left of the street vultures are going down.
Separate from the delivery, the tone of Robocop's writing is, I'm not going to say wrong, because the way he's written in a game fills a different purpose than it does in a film, but I will say that it's not quite fit for purpose. It just sounds so inconsistent and odd. Murphy is in the rarest of moments still the tragic, crestfallen figure we remember, every line the vocal equivalent of the 1,000-yard stare.
So what do you say, officer? Is that possibly something that could be of interest to you?
I am not sure.
At other times, he's like cracking jokes and dispensing fortune cookie wisdom while issuing parking tickets.
One that likes swimming in oil surely must be swimming in money.
So earlier, I said that game writing is different to movie writing, and it is, but even within the context of game writing, video game Murphy is not well written. Robocop in Rogue City is kind of chatty, like he talks a lot, and if you're going to have that volume of dialogue, then it automatically makes him a fundamentally different character than the movie Robocop, because the movie Robocop did not say much, except for a few bangers here or there.
Where is Kane? Where is Kane? Where is Kane?
Rogue City Robocop would have been much better written as an almost silent protagonist, so he could talk, but way less than he does here. That would not only bring him closer to the source material, but it would also allow us as the player to fill that silence with our imagination, or let the outcomes of our decisions speak louder than our words. This endlessly inquisitive, sermonizing, wisecracking rendition of Robocop is effective as an exposition tool, like he gets the quest givers to give him the objectives, but it really doesn't sound at all, in voice or tone or delivery or otherwise, like the Robocop or Alex Murphy we grew up with. And that has nothing to do with Peter Weller's age. Going a layer deeper than this, Teon don't really know how to handle the question of Murphy's humanity, which is one of the biggest and most important through lines in any Robocop story. It's a funny question to fixate on because it's all but resolved in the minds of the audience. Clearly, Murphy is human, and we don't for a second doubt that, but not everyone in his world sees it that way. And for him, it's less about whether or not he sees himself as human and more about whether or not he dares to let that humanity in. It's easier for him and safer for those around him to surrender to his identity as a machine. It spares him the pain of reckoning with what he's lost and insulates him from the desire to lead a life he can no longer lead. That through line is maintained here in Robocop Rogue City, though it's very awkwardly handled, victim to the fact that this game's narrative bit off way more than it could chew, and the fact that the writers lack the skill and subtle hand to really land these themes properly. It mirrors Robocop 2 actually, which opened with this as a central theme and then just completely abandoned that plotline as it focused more on OCP's villainous plot to take Detroit private. Rogue City's opening sets all of this up with a flashback sequence where Murphy is reminded of his past life when he sees a TV film set depicting a family home.
James really looks up to you. He said in school that he wants to be a police officer just like his dad.
Soon after that, he's in a tense standoff with a thug threatening a hostage, but Murphy kind of glitches out and he sees his wife instead, meaning that Lewis has to come in and save the day.
You work so hard, honey. Why don't you take some leave? We all could use a little break from this reality, don't you think?
The whole thing was filmed by a thrifty reporter who just happened to be on site, and when that footage goes public, that becomes the catalyst for a lot of the game's major plot points, like the fact that Murphy gets a new chip put in his head that facilitates a score screen at the end of a mission, or the fact that OCP are keen to replace Robocop with a more reliable lineup of hardware. Or the fact that Murphy is assigned a new handler, a rookie cop whose job it is to basically spy on Robocop and report everything back to OCP.
Meaning?
Aside from his regular dispatch duty, Officer Washington will become your personal overseer.
Most importantly, it sets you up for these psych evaluation sessions, which are one-on-one interviews with a psychiatrist exploring themes like Robocop's humanity, his connection to past memories, and how he perceives himself. On the one hand, these conversations are interesting because they let you decide for yourself how human you want this Robocop to be. You can select the dialogue options that arc towards Murphy, a man with a past, a family taken from him, a future that is his to determine. Or you can choose to embrace the machine, closing off your connections to your past, relegating yourself to property of OCP.
They would not want to see me like this.
Perhaps not. But the alternative isn't much better.
So this is a cool angle, and had this part of the narrative more room to breathe, it could have really worked. But this game also has Robocop saving the life of a drug addict, mentoring a rookie cop, watching over his partner Lewis, working with a news reporter to uncover corruption, fighting OCP's newest mechanical monsters, and even a political subplot where Robocop basically gets to choose who becomes mayor. There is too much going on here, and as such, many of the storylines don't land properly, and the whole is Robocop human through line is one of the biggest casualties of this. You get a couple of these therapy sessions with these dialogue options, and then the whole thing is wrapped up really hastily at the back end of the game. There is an effort to link all of this to the main plot and villain, with the antagonist promising to somehow give Murphy his old life back. But again, the whole thing is rolled out and wrapped up so fast because there's just so much else that needs to be wrapped up before the credits roll. Like much of the rest of Rogue City, this part of the game isn't able to say anything new on this subject, relying instead on the source material for its most poignant and thought-provoking moments.
I do not remember my family. I can only feel them.
Outside of these franchise pillars, the character writing and voice work for the supporting cast is actually pretty good. There's this junkie turned police informant named Pickles. He's pretty entertaining. There's an OCP guy running things at the police station who is perfectly hateable, as all good OCP goons should be. The antagonist is a real standout, actually, exuding all of this 80s villain charisma that one might hope for. A huge amount of Alan Rickman energy going on right here, and I'm very into it. But yeah, when it comes to Lewis and Murphy, they stand out as being one aspect of the Robocop experience that Teon might have understood and wanted to pay homage to, but they just couldn't get it right no matter how hard they tried. Related to this is the overall tone of Rogue City. Now, I watched a few reviews of the game when they went live, and one comment I kept seeing was something along the lines of, it really captures the satire and humor and tone of the originals. And I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? Have you even seen Robocop? If you have seen Robocop, there is no way you can say that this has a similar tone or sense of humor or any of that. Absolutely no way. They're completely different, but that does not mean that Rogue City is bad. It just means that it's different. So, Robocop 1 is an action sci-fi movie, but it's also a satirical black comedy that walks a very fine line between obvious pantomime and a more subtle brand of nihilistic political and societal commentary delivered through something akin to like gallows humor. I'm not going to come out here and say that Robocop is subtle, because it wasn't, but there was just enough subtlety and it left just enough unsaid that you could feel pretty clever about yourself when you got the jokes, and it allowed the whole thing to remain very serious-faced when we were ultimately talking about a situation where a company welded a full set of plate mail onto a dude's body and told him to go out and fight crime. Robocop 2, written by Frank Miller, by the way, yes, that Frank Miller, was less about that subtlety and more about that pantomime. There was an entire section where a Little League team robbed an electronics store, and Murphy decides that the best thing he can do in that moment is lecture them. There's a scene where Murphy gives a guy a bullet hole halo because he's smoking. One of the main villains in the movie is this little kid who's this stone cold killer, and he's put in charge of this entire criminal enterprise at like age 10 or whatever. Also, they made Lewis look like this. What the fuck were they thinking? Robocop 2 is more silly than the previous film, but despite that, it's still got enough darkness and it's saying just enough about its themes that it all still hangs together. It feels like Robocop, albeit a little more campy. Robocop Rogue City takes the pantomime and campy dial and turns it up to like 15. This game is full to bursting with ridiculous characters, silly side quests, hilarious dialogue, either intentionally or unintentionally. Hell, Robocop dances in this game. He just straight up dances.
Hey, Robo! Do the robot dance!
Watch and learn, young man.
The criminal gang that you're fighting are like the most stupid video game thugs you've ever seen. They're like half a step removed from Borderlands villains.
Don't adjust your television sets. Your regularly scheduled program will be back shortly.
There's a quest line that involves drug dealers lecturing a pusher on the nature of free market economics.
It's been proven time and time again that such action leads to a reduction of future demand, yours included. Antitrust laws are there for a reason.
There's an entire sequence where you go to a video store to scan fake VHS tapes before eventually gang members turn up because they want the same VHS tape that you are trying to rent.
I think I found it. I messed up the title a little. It's called Me, Sire. But here it is.
Isn't that the tape we're looking for?
Tape? What? What tape?
You like movies? Do you want to shoot an action movie?
I think I'll wait till it comes out on VHS.
Lights, camera, action!
By the way, there is a spoiler explanation for that exchange that makes it slightly less ridiculous, but the point still stands. This is a very, very silly Robocop video game. So at first, when I encountered this, I was like, uh-oh. What have they done? These guys obviously don't get it. Sad times. Eventually, though, what I came to realize is that Teon were not trying to create the sardonic, nihilistic satire of Robocop. Instead, they were trying to create their own, more absurdist take on the franchise. And you know what? It actually works, because this is absurd. This is a walking, talking, armored refrigerator of a man cruising the streets of Detroit, trying to police a city rendered unpoliceable by the deliberate actions of an omnipotent corporate entity. We are well into the late-stage capitalism endgame right here when Robocop rocks up and starts spinning his Auto 9 and shooting crooks in the dick. This is absurd, and so Teon has said, fuck it, lean into that, and like I said, it actually works. It works especially well here because it gives them license to do all sorts of stupid video game shit, like collectibles and side quests and skill trees and mission ratings and stuff that would feel really out of place if you were going for a more grimdark rendition of Detroit and the people within it. Much of what we do in video games is farcical when you really think about it, and so Robocop Rogue City just kind of owns that and says, video games are inherently ridiculous, Robocop is inherently ridiculous, let's not overthink it too much, and let's just have some fun. But the foundation for that really is the love and care that Teon have poured into this thing. If it was absent that attention to detail, if it was absent the obvious reverence for the source material, then this utterly absurd tone would make Robocop Rogue City feel like a cash grab. Like a company got hold of the rights to Robocop but couldn't be bothered to make an experience that felt authentic. Like a cheap, pathetic knockoff with no vision, made by hacks with no talent, and with a fucking jetpack. Why the fuck did it need to have that Sorry. I started talking about Robocop 3 again. I always get upset when that happens. Point is, when it comes to story, characters, satire, humor, and tone, I don't think that Robocop Rogue City feels authentically Robocop, but I do feel as though it's a sincere, earnest take on this setting, and while I think some big parts of it don't quite work, enough of it works that I actually really enjoyed seeing this silly, exaggerated take on this franchise that means so much to me.
Oh! Gonna have to strip search you. Belt, keys, loose change, huh? I'm kidding. Just keep walking.
One area where I don't think Robocop Rogue City is getting enough credit is how good it looks and how perfectly this simple aesthetic captures the essence of Detroit as it's depicted in the movies. Robocop Rogue City runs in Unreal Engine 5, which to this point has been used to push out visuals that scream, "Look at me, I am next gen!" That's worked well in some instances, like Lords of the Fallen, and failed pretty spectacularly in others, like Immortals of Avium. Robocop Rogue City is the first Unreal Engine 5 game I've played that didn't look like it was desperate to impress. Most of it looks rather plain, but it's smartly using things like ray trace reflections in the city streets at night, or really responsive sunlight and shadows in internal spaces, or advanced mesh technology in the quarry area to create some very detailed and believable terrain. It's also impressive to see how much Teon have gone above and beyond in terms of the technology that Rogue City is supporting, featuring all of the major upscaling techs as well as DLSS 3 frame generation. Playing this on a 4090, I was able to comfortably clear 80 frames a second with native rendering, and I was generally sitting at about 150 frames a second with DLSS 3 turned on. In terms of bugs, there were definitely a few of them, but I think I got luckier than most, since I've heard pretty widespread reports of the game being quite janky. I didn't really experience much of that, though I did play after a number of patches had already rolled through, and Teon have already said that they're still working on improvements. When it comes to bugs, it's like Murphy says.
They'll fix you. They fix everything.
So when Robocop Rogue City was first revealed, it was through a brief gameplay trailer that showed Robocop doing what he does best, slowly walking forward into a hail of bullet fire, doming criminals who all conveniently forgot that they are shooting guns at a bulletproof target. The initial response to the gameplay was like, okay, that looks like it'd be fun for a few hours, but can you really make a whole game based on that? Evidently, Teon did not think that you could, which is why the shooting is only one part of this game. I really struggled to believe it, but Robocop Rogue City is like if you cross a Bethesda-style, narrative-led, choice-driven RPG with Time Crisis. Much like the game's approach to characters and tone, it definitely works, but it's also got some serious problems too. Robocop Rogue City actually has quite a strong story setup. It's basically Robocop 3 if you didn't completely fuck up that storyline. OCP wants to build Delta City, and they are intent on relocating the existing citizens of Detroit in order to do that, only they're not putting wrecking balls through occupied homes or getting the SS to bust people out, like in Robocop 3. They're instead tearing away at the fabric of the city through crime, through corrupt politics, through the dismantling of the police department, and through the drug trade. So that's already an ambitious setup, but Teon wanted to be even more ambitious by delivering this overarching narrative through a number of subplots, most of them stretching the full length of the game, most of them having multiple beats and decision points along the way, and most of them having alternative endings based upon the decisions that you make. Now that is extremely cool, but as I said, I think in this instance, Teon's eyes were just a little too big for their stomach. I would say that there are actually 7 major plot arcs in this game, and that's separate from the few dozen side quests that are on offer as well. You're looking at about 15 to 20 hours runtime for this game, and that's generous, but even that is not enough to fit all of this in. As a result, a lot of the storytelling feels really truncated. The whole is Murphy human thing I described earlier is a good example, but so is the whole thing with the rookie cop, where you need to not only determine if he can be trusted, but also train him up and also ingratiate him to other officers so they'll stop hazing him, and all this needs to be done over the span of like 4 actual missions with him. With this pace, this decision-making stuff becomes very clunky. It's often quite unclear what impact your dialogue choices will have on a given situation, let alone the broader outcome. Hell, sometimes the game kind of makes decisions for you. In the whole mayoral campaign subplot, one of the candidates invites me into his car to talk. Now this guy is an OCP puppet. I do not like this dude, and so when he tacitly asks me for his support, I'm like, no.
So, what do you think about getting involved in politics?
I stay far away from politics.
Regardless of this choice, the exchange still ends with a prompt that says, you supported this jerk, whatever his name is. And I'm like, no I didn't, fuck you. The exact same thing happens later on, but with the other candidate. He invites me into his office to chat. I don't get any dialogue prompts at all, and yet the game tells me that somehow, just by listening to this guy, I've supported him.
What more do you need to know to support me?
I will think about it.
Sure. Take your time, but not too much time. The election is in 2 days.
So it's cool that we get all this stuff, but it would have been better if it actually, worked properly. Had Teon rescoped this and gone for a more narrowly focused game and story, they would have been able to tighten all of this up, and we could have got some stronger plot lines that hit harder, backed up by some meaty decision making that felt impactful. What I've described there relates to the main storylines in the game, but in addition to that, there are also side quests. A lot of them, in fact. Some of them are pretty cool. One of them in particular really stands out. It's about a murder of a prostitute, and the person who's accused of doing it is someone famous and rich and powerful. It's a storyline that really fits not only the Robocop universe, but also the Robocop character. Like, this is the sort of work that Murphy was made to do, and Robocop Rogue City gives you the chance to do it.
Somebody dumped her a few feet from here. The blood traces on the ground indicate she was dragged.
At the same time, there are also side quests where Robocop is sent to find missing cats, using his advanced cybernetics to scan and track their paw prints. At another point, someone's car is broken and then you need to help them fix it.
The coil has been disconnected.
That would explain the car not starting.
And yes, you will cruise the streets of Detroit issuing parking fines if someone parks too close to a fire hydrant.
1 parking ticket is all it takes to improve mindfulness.
It's weird that Robocop has to do all of this shit. Yes, it furthers the absurdist tone because it's one thing to have a human tank walking the streets to dispense justice, and it's quite another to have him issuing tickets for double parking. But even in furtherance of this absurdity, It's just kind of boring, like it really is. Back at the precinct, there's this whole other series of quests that involve police officers getting Murphy to do inane shit. At one point, the lights go out, and they're like, hey Murphy, go turn the lights back on. So you literally just walk downstairs and flip a switch, and that is the side mission. There's another where the servers are on the fritz, and you just walk around looking at them, and that somehow fixes them. One of the officers can't handle the smell of vomit, and so you have to help her carry a drunkard into a cell, and that's it.
I can deal with blood, guts, but puke is a no-go for me. Oh, be a sport and move his ass to the drunk tank for me. You've got your special gloves and extra protection, so you shouldn't mind.
I guess the point of these missions, and the ones on the streets, are to establish that despite his armored exterior and internal cybernetics, he's still just a cop. But he's not just a cop, he's different, and this side content really only further enforces how different he is, rather than making it seem like he's the regular cop that I think Rogue City is trying to paint him as. This awkward side content kind of reinforces what I said earlier, that Rogue City's tone and satire doesn't feel authentically Robocop, but you know what does feel like pure, distilled, aged to perfection genius? Shooting criminals in the nuts. And everywhere else as well, I guess. When it comes to combat, it is unbelievably impressive how well Taeon understood the assignment. The action is essentially all based on this scene from Robocop 1, where Murphy bursts through the door of a drug lab and just slowly walks through the room, killing absolutely everyone, one at a time, stopping only to strike sick-ass poses or do trick shots. Taeon understood the power of this scene, and they just sought to recreate it. This part man, part machine moves at approximately 3 kilometers an hour, or 4 if he's sprinting. Taeon did not give Robocop a double jump or a slide. His 2 feet remain firmly on the ground at all times. He cannot even negotiate simple 10-inch ledges most of the time. They did not give Robocop some new space magic that lets him teleport or some shit, and they certainly did not give him a fucking jetpack. Sorry, it happened again. Point is, Taeon did not ask what would we want Robocop to be able to do. They just asked, what can he do? And then they just designed his combat and movement capabilities around that. You have the greatest sidearm in the history of weaponry, the Auto 9. You've got his targeting computer, which tracks and highlights targets, but still requires manual aiming. There is no auto-aim hacks here. There's a few indulgences here and there, like a flashbang ability and a reflex mode that kicks in when you breach doors, but nothing too egregious. Hell, they even have the ability to ricochet bullets off panels, like that scene in Robocop 2 with the baby.
We can't have that.
Much like the rest of the game, the adherence to the source material is this protective blanket that helps get this to the point where even if it totally sucked, we'd still enjoy it on some level. Like, even if this was the worst shooter since GoldenEye Rogue Agent, we'd still be like, God damn man, it feels so good to be Robocop. But Taeon did not rest on the franchise's laurels or our member berries. Instead, they delivered up a surprisingly competent shooter that nails the fundamentals. It feels really good to shoot the Auto 9. Enemies will burst like pop watermelons when you dome them. The level design is simple but functional, and enemy placement within those levels works well, providing a meaningful challenge without ever making things feel frustrating. And that couldn't have been an easy balance to hit, because a big part of the Robocop fantasy is the idea of him walking out into the middle of a big room with like 30 dudes shooting at him. You can do that here, and in fact you must do that, but you're not invincible. You do take damage, and the very precise calibration of enemy density, damage output, and health pack economy means that you are absolutely able to live out the Robocop fantasy of your childhood, but you're also being challenged by a gameplay loop that does ask you to be at least a little bit smart when it comes to things like cover and target prioritization. That's another thing that makes this whole thing work really well. There are actually quite a few enemy types here, and each of them gets a cool intro the very first time you meet them. Of small arms goons, but later on you'll meet grenadiers and snipers and enemies that buff other enemies and heavily armored shotgun rushers, and of course enemy robots. The pace at which they are introduced is pitch perfect, regularly introducing you to new elements just as things start to feel a little bit stale. The other thing that keeps things feeling really fresh is a simple but surprisingly effective progression system. Robocop earns XP as he dispenses justice, and that can be used to purchase upgrades. They're basic stats like health and more damage, sure, but every few nodes you unlock some new capability, like your ricochet bullets will split and hit more targets, or you reflect small arms fire back at enemies so they end up KOing each other, other. Some of them even help outside of combat, like the ability to scan objects from further away, or nodes that'll help you in dialogue exchanges, making it easier to talk your way toward a resolution. The Auto 9's upgrade system is particularly excellent. You'll find these motherboards which have these networks of nodes, and you'll also find these data cores that slot into those nodes. The cores all direct power in different ways, and what you want to do is power up the nodes so that they give you the good stuff while avoiding the nodes that reduce your stats. If you do it right, you'll unlock the marquee nodes on each board, such as one that means you never have to reload the Auto 9, and another one that just makes combat more gory. That's all it does. It just straight up makes body parts explode more often, and that is awesome. God bless Teon for putting that in. Between the enemy design and tuning, the level layouts, the weapon fundamentals, and the progression pathways, combat in Rogue City is very, very solid. But, despite Teon's best efforts, it does start to wear a little thin by the end. This is like a longer game, 15 to 20 hours, and by the end, you've really got the measure of all this stuff. You will have spent a long time just walking out into the middle of a room to shoot a bunch of bad guys. I really don't think there would have been any way around that though, short of a shorter game or potentially another playable protagonist like the rookie cop who might fight alongside Murphy in certain missions, which I actually think would have been perfect for this game because you get access to a different, more agile, but also more vulnerable combat style, and you can also get this rookie to do all of this weird side quest bullshit, which is absolutely not Murphy's job. Get the rookie to turn the lights back on so Murphy can focus on kicking ass and eating baby food. Regardless of how tired this gameplay loop might start to feel after a while, the fact remains, Teon absolutely pulled it off here. They delivered a Robocop combat loop that trusted the source material and delivered on a fantasy that we'd all been dreaming about since we were 8 years old. Robocop is cool, and when it comes to the shooting, this game makes you feel like Robocop. That's right, I said the thing. It makes you feel like Robocop, and I'll go one step further. It really makes you walk with the exaggerated swagger of an omni-consumer product. Okay, so to recap, Robocop Rogue City is like a Bethesda game crossed with Time Crisis. It's in one moment a serious commentary on urban decay and late-stage capitalism, and in the next moment it has Robocop doing the robot dance. It's loving homage to some of the best locations, moments, lines, and scenarios in the original films, while also struggling to faithfully recreate some of those things, particularly characters like Murphy and Lewis. And it's Robocop murdering criminals by the dozen, but also leaving enough room to look for misplaced kitty cats and issue parking tickets. So, with all of that contradictory context, we can then ask, is Robocop Rogue City good? And the answer is, yeah, basically. But I do wonder how much appeal this might have to someone who isn't a dyed-in-the-wool Robocop fan. Like, if you were just a casual Robocop enjoyer, maybe saw the movie 10 years ago or whatever, would you enjoy this? If you have never seen Robocop before, first of all, what the hell is the matter with you? But secondly, could you go into Rogue City as your first foray into the Robocop universe and enjoy it? I'm gonna say a pretty hard no to both of those things. Robocop Rogue City's defining characteristic is its reverence for the source material. This is first and foremost a celebration of the cinematic masterpiece that is Robocop. In service of that goal, Teon is often clumsy in their execution, but as fans, we're willing to look past all of that stuff because we just appreciate that Teon had a red-hot go and delivered so many things that actually do work. We take the good with the bad because we appreciate that Teon loved this thing as much as we do. But if you don't love it, then I suspect all you're really going to see is its uneven tone, its odd approach to side content, its limited gameplay loop, its half-baked RPG, and its messy narrative. None of this stuff on its own is terminal, but without that love to carry you through, I think these gripes are going to pile up pretty fast. But yeah, for the rest of us, Robocop Rogue City is a low-key triumph, it really is. At the very least, it's a simple, silly, and fun romp that makes you feel like Robocop, in a way that no other video game has been able to do to this point. And at best, Robocop Rogue City is kind of like the Robocop 3 that we never got, because everyone knows they only made 2 Robocop movies and they stopped after that. Nothing exists after Robocop 2. But now we have this. So thanks Teon, and not for nothing, but I'd be pretty happy to see you guys take a swing at Robocop 4. I'm coming up on 4 years now of using Raycon wireless earbuds. That's a long time. Now, I know you've heard about Raycons before, you watch YouTube so you've seen the ads, but Raycon are out there like that because they're proud of what they make, and they should be. Raycon earbuds have always been some of the best value earbuds on the market, delivering sound quality, features, and battery life that competes with premium earbuds, but Raycon delivers all of that at a fraction of the price. It's such a reasonable price point that I've bought many pairs over the years, gifting them to friends and family because we all need another set of earbuds, right? The pair we keep in our backpack, our gym bag, the ones we leave in our lockers at school or work. Nothing I hate more than being without earbuds, so I have a few pairs of Raycons laying around, and that's saved me on plenty of occasions. As for using them, I've always loved them. Their custom gel tips create a snug, comfortable, noise-isolating fit, and Raycons actually stay in my ear. That's one of the biggest reasons I use them, actually. I've tried other earbuds, and the shape of my ear means they just fall out, but Raycons stay in no matter what I'm doing. They have earbud tap functions, allowing me to pause or skip songs without having to touch my phone. Plus, they sound great, and the carry case is nice and small, so it fits easily in my pocket. The holidays are coming, and Raycons make the perfect gift, and in fact, you can get a huge discount on them thanks to Raycon's upcoming Black Friday sale. It's going live early, so if you visit buyraycon.com/skillup, you can get 20% off anything on the site, 25% off their fitness earbuds, 30% off their tech kits, 30% off their impact earbuds and impact speaker, and up to 50% off other selected items. Those are the absolute best prices you're going to find on stuff that was already very reasonably priced, so get your Christmas shopping done early this year thanks to Raycon. Visit buyraycon.com/skillup to save between 20 and 50% off depending on the item. Thanks Raycon for sponsoring the video, and thank you for watching it.